Welcome to another episode of Podcasting Sucks. It's a
Sucks.
branch of Good Morning Podcasters by the lovely, sensual, beautiful.
Yeah.
I'm literally looking at him right now. He looks beautiful. Fuzz Martin. Of course, I'm Jeff Townsend. And today we're going to talk about why podcasting sucks. Fuzz, how are you doing, man?
I'm doing well, Jeff. Thank you. And we both look stellar in our Christmas attire.
Yeah, you could probably hear me off in the distance trying to squeeze this like the sweater on that I wore in junior high, maybe, or
No, you look good.
I'm saying junior high, right? But Lord knows, it's just I've got fat recently. It's not junior high, but you know what I mean. So yeah,
Junior lows. I'm wearing a Christmas sweater, but it is a CrossFit Christmas sweater. So it's got elves flipping a tire. I got one doing deadlifts.
I saw that.
One doing pull-ups. I got one doing box jumps. I got one doing rows with a dumbbell. Yeah. So
And of course, it's also very tighter. You're not just
yeah.
wearing some baggy Christmas sweater. You're showing off your CrossFit.
Yeah,
I
exactly.
like that for sure.
Thank you.
Fuzz,
Yeah.
we're trying video today. Are you going to use this video?
Yeah, we'll put this up on
Oh,
YouTube.
sweet.
Might as well. We've got a channel. Might as well use it,
Fair enough.
But that does come up in one of the topics here today because, we want to talk about priorities. And there's a lot of prioritization that comes in when you're doing podcasting. And it's not just in what you should be doing on your show, but just all around, right? So your life, your professional priorities, and then your show priorities and your financial priorities. All those kind of come into play here. And, it's one of those things that makes podcasting suck, but we love it, right? And we're happy to be here. So, and I'm happy to be here with you, Jeff, as we come into the holidays. It's nice.
I know, time just flying, man. It's crazy. Is this the fourth recording of this, or?
This is the fourth episode, yeah. And we acquired Podcasting Sucks from Tanner Campbell back around Halloween. I think it was either on Halloween or around Halloween.
Yeah.
And we're not even to Christmas yet. So here we go.
All right, man. So like you said, Fuzz is taking charge this week. He's got a whole agenda. He spent at least 70 hours, excuse me as I bust my knuckles on the table, 70 hours getting ready for this discussion tonight.
Great. Now I have to prioritize editing that knuckle bust out of the audio.
Don't do that. Yeah. There's like there's a video rule because I will never.
Yeah.
Paying a video editor is a whole other freaking level if you have to. If not, it's time consuming. So my rule is go with the flow on the video unless it's disastrous. I don't do all these angles. I know you're in Adobe. I know you're like the master at video, but it's still a lot of work.
Yeah, it is a lot of work. And that comes into this whole conversation here today is like what is worth it in terms of your time? Like what are you doing? Do you have to be doing all the things that you're doing? And this conversation actually came up because in my personal life, so I run a business, and that, well, first and foremost, as we all are, right? So I'm a dad.
Yep.
Got a family. Got to worry about that first. Then professionally, worry about my job, worry about my business, my employees, all those things. And then I work with nonprofits, and I'm Mayor McFuzz here in our small town, and
you're the man.
And these things, well, that all adds up to time, right? And we have time's finite. And if you want to be spending time with your kids, your family, you need to not spend all of your time doing other things like podcasting or editing out knuckle busts in a video podcast, or even maybe doing a video podcast. Might be more time than it's worth. Who knows? But I really think it's time to look at those things and to really hone in on what makes sense. Doing what is right for your schedule, not doing what you think is expected of you from society.
Yeah.
And all that. So
you can't do everything, right? I mean, not many people are capable of doing everything. I mean, just an average, everyday indie podcaster, we'll call it, for sure. Yeah, it's a struggle.
It is. It is. Like when you look at life priorities, it's not just even family too. It's like, I'm wearing this CrossFit Christmas sweater. Like, uh, it's and I don't do CrossFit anymore, but as you can see by the way the sweater fits, but but I do go to the gym every morning, and getting to the gym is a priority because health, like my personal health, all
Hmm.
this other stuff goes away if my personal health isn't there, right? So,
Yeah,
uh, making time for me and time for me to, you know, work off the Cheez-Its that I'm eating during the holiday season here, those kind of things are important for the rest of all of this. But it's time. It's 15 minutes to drive there and an hour to work out and 15 minutes to drive home. It's hour and a
yeah,
half every day. So, um, you know, th- mental health in your time that like if you don't have any downtime and you're always doing stuff for other people or even for things that like, podcasting can be work, uh,
yeah.
that can really weigh on your mental health. So I think it's important that, when you look at these life priorities, family, health, your financial stability, are you spending more on podcasting than you're making? And is that harming you financially? Are you able, if you're able to cover this hobby as we talked about in a previous episode, you know, you're not out golfing or you know, drinking a 12er of high dollar IPAs or something.
Yeah.
You're like is this your hobby? Can you afford it?
Yep.
And is it making sense for you? So, life priorities. I don't know. Are there other kinds of life priorities that you can think of that get in the way of what you're doing or what you want to do with your show or your podcast?
Oh, well, I mean, I think you pretty much so covered it. And a lot of it is like you said, it comes down to time, right?
Mhm.
What you want to do with your time. Because there's a lot of work with a lot even with this podcast, but other ones like you do a local one, I do a local one. There's a lot of work that goes in before that you probably don't think about or realize unless you are a podcaster, right?
Mhm.
And it's really prioritizing and being realistic what you can and can't do with your time because I need to work on that myself because I'm trying to do a million things right now. But it's going to come down to what you want to do with your time. Like for me, I maybe get 3 hours of sleep a night.
Mhm.
I have other podcast jobs. I guess an industry job. It sounds weird saying that, but you know what I mean. For me, it's what am I going to do? And I sacrifice a lot of time and I sacrifice a lot of sleep. So I
Mhm.
think it's life in general. It's going to be different for everybody, but
Yeah.
it could be anything, right? I mean, a co-host like
Mhm.
you get impacted by mine. Like we had to stop recording once, so we couldn't record. I mean,
Yep.
because of something I had going on. So it's also when you're doing podcasting with somebody else, which some people are completely against, but I prefer it, man. I love it,
Mhm.
and that's another factor that you have almost no control over. So that also comes around to something that's important with life and podcasting. You really have to try not to worry about the things that you can't control
Mhm.
and just do what you can with what you have. Easier said than done, though.
Yeah, and I think even back to that, it comes down to like write out all the things you're doing and find where the efficiencies could come, like what is necessary. Uh, One thing, and you and I have talked about this off the air, but when we went and bought Good Morning Podcasters and Podcasting Sucks, and I'm not to name drop Tanner, but his whole thing was doing a podcast every day, right? Well,
Yeah,
I run a business. I mean, he was running a business, but I have 80 employees. He
yeah,
has, you know, he had himself. His business was what he was doing, is what he's doing. I have kids. Like I was then though when I took it over trying to do what he was doing before he left this, and that's
Yeah.
you brought it up, and I feel like you gave me permission to to be okay with I don't have to be him, and I can do it my own way, and I don't need to podcast every single day of the week.
Nope.
So I'll cut it back to what's reasonable and what feels good because I love doing it. It's just a matter of working it into a schedule and making sure that the thing that I love doing isn't getting in the way of the things that I also have to do in order, again, back to life and family and taking care of my other responsibilities. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, like, you know, we talk show priorities. You're right. Coordinating with your co-host and your guests. If you're doing interviews, like you do interviews on your Indiana show, right?
Yep.
And finding, time that works for them and works for you. And it depends on how long your show is and all of that can really impact,
You got to find them too, right? In my case,
yeah,
I got to go out and
100%.
find them. That,
Same
that's
here.
that,
Yep.
that's harder than you would think. Like I have a podcast about podcasting, but indie podcaster.
Hmm.
It is not hard to find people to be on that podcast. I'm going to
Right.
be honest with you. I've
Yep.
got a wait list. I actually go out and seek people in the industry as well, though.
Hmm.
But with this Indiana stories, I'm finding these stories that maybe aren't always as well known, right?
Hmm.
In a historical sense in Indiana that are interesting. So I really have to work hard to find some of these. Like, I don't know what I'm going to do for Monday's episode. I have two things that I'm looking for, crazy rare events.
Yep.
And I can't get one person to come on and talk about it. No one's comfortable with it, or they
Hmm.
say they don't know enough. That takes a lot of time to try to research and find these people. It does.
100%. And so the other thing is that when you're doing a local podcast like this, and actually would be yesterday's episode of Good Morning Podcasters is about hyperlocal podcasting. And that part of that, getting the people that you're going to interview, a lot of times they haven't been on a podcast before. So it also comes down to microphone etiquette. Are they in a
Mhm.
room that's going to sound good? Because if they're not, you're going to spend extra time editing, or you might end up scrapping the whole thing if it sounds real bad.
And it's
I've
hard to
had
explain that to a senior citizen, Fuzz.
exactly, and like, hey, could you at least wear, a pair of AirPod or
Mhm.
earbuds with a microphone on it, a wired microphone or something? They don't They don't get that. And thankfully, I think the pandemic helped a little bit with some people, and after a while, they got used to doing that. But it is if you don't have a studio that you're bringing people into, and even if you do, like my show, I have a studio, I can have 2 guests in at once, and inevitably, like, I gotta tell somebody to, swallow the microphone and, like, get close. They're pretty good at it, but if they haven't been on a podcast before, it's hearing themselves in the headphones for the first time and all of that stuff is foreign to them, and that becomes an editing issue on the back end.
Creates a lot more work. So you try to make sure when we're prioritizing, another thing is really prioritizing on what you want to focus on when you're
Mhm.
communicating with them, even in that sense, because that's going to have an impact later. Prioritizing on making sure you're asking and saying the right things, because if you have to
Mhm.
edit things out later, it's more work, right? Try to keep them on track, saying what you want them to say. And I'm not a scripted kind of guy, but I still realize that go down a rabbit hole, that's going to be more work for me.
Yep. My show and my hyperlocal show is about positive people, places, and things in Washington County, Wisconsin. So I'm not out to get any like groundbreaking, like gotcha moments or any, real deep stuff. I'm trying to get the stories out for these places. So what I
Yeah.
typically do for my show is I'll write out what I call starter questions. And I know there's some people who are absolutely against this, and I don't care. Is I'll say, here's what I'm planning on asking you. Like, this is kind of the flow of the show. So we've got a beginning, middle, and an end. It always times out to 15 minutes ish. And the They come in, they're comfortable because they know what I'm going to ask them. There are a lot fewer uhs and ums because I have prepped. They know what they're going to be talking about. I've prepped them on it. But it does take time to put that together and do the research. But I'll tell you this, doing the research, and this was even true in my radio days, if you spent an hour doing show prep in the morning, your show was so much better than if you tried to wing it. And that same goes for when you're interviewing guests. So I guess put in the work, but if you put in the work, it should save you on the back end of the work, but it's still time. So
What I've come to realize also is when you're talking to people, let's say they're politicians, right? Let's say they're significant members of the community. They almost put you through a vetting process. It's more work too. They will require those questions. They will require things like that. They will require you to share episodes that they should listen to. Uh, that's another way where it's work, right? Because I've sent things and they want to know more, so you got to do more.
Yep.
And you almost, and I think the difficult thing for me becomes, how do you plan for the unknown? How do you have, let's just say, like a little bit of buffer time in there, for example? That's where I really struggle with, because like, like I said earlier, I'm doing a lot of different things, as you know. So I really struggle with, if I have to do more or something shifted, then I start to really struggle with trying to keep up and not get buried.
Yeah. Yeah. That's really, it's real easy for that to happen. And you were talking about, worrying about getting your show up for Monday. And that's the same. I moved mine to Tuesdays because I found that trying to do that over the weekends was, it was killing my weekends. And so I'd rather kill a couple hours on a Monday night than have to, take time on Sunday when I just want to have some downtime away. So I moved my show release date from Mondays to Tuesdays for that reason. But it, it goes back to that mental health. And, people always say, like, do what you love and you'll never work a day in your life. But when you start making a job out of your passion and hobby, sometimes it becomes a job and not something you love anymore. I used to do photography back in the mid 2000s to,
Polaroid cameras.
yes, Polaroids. I was doing Getty, and I worked for Getty and iStock, but it was such a grind setting up photo shoots, bringing my lights, hauling my lights and my, backgrounds, and, lining up models and getting releases and editing photos down to make them, high enough quality to get accepted onto Getty.
Yeah.
It took a lot. It paid off. I was making good money from it once my library was big enough, but sustainably not there for a long term with having a career and other stuff. If I wasn't going to go into that full time. Now going back into the podcast world, though, it's a lot more too than recording and editing and posting. Like, there's the whole promotion of things. We talk about the different social media channels and, what channels should you be on, or where should you be spending your focus. And I saw something from Mark Asquith. He's doing his advent calendar piece, and he really talked about, it really is. And he talked about owning one channel at a time and not spreading your focus all over the place. And I think it's very good and important advice. It kind of feels hard to say, well, I might have some audience on Facebook, and I might have some audience on Twitter and TikTok and YouTube Shorts and Instagram Reels. And, I don't even know if I said Twitter yet. And there's the new ones that are coming out. But you can't really do all of those well if you're not doing it full time, right? I mean, it's hard.
And I think the thing that I see working with a lot of podcasters, as you are now doing, you're welcome. It's a fun world to be in. It's also making sure you're prioritizing things in the sense that you're doing the right things. You're doing things the right way. You're not wasting your time. I give this example all the time. but it's a really good example because this is a podcast about podcasting.
Yep.
Tweeting out your stuff to a bunch of other podcasters and sending gifts and the podcast attaboys, that's a waste of time, right? So to me, it's waste. I look at waste in the sense of what it is, and you don't have value from it. Simply, right? That's what waste is. So it's non-value added. And that's an example of that. So when you're talking about prioritizing, it's important that you're doing the right things as well, or you're going to either, one, waste a lot of time, or two, going to have to do a hell of a lot more work on top of the stuff that you're doing that's wasting your time.
Yeah. And so your point too is that you got to be talking to the right audience and not just speaking to the echo chamber. There's going to be a lot of people that are going to like your posts when you talk. A lot of podcasters will say, yeah, attaboy, you posted a podcast, here's a like for you, but that doesn't equate to listens.
Unfortunately,
what equates to listens is when you have a community and you've connected with that community. And it, going back to this point, it's where do you want that community to be? Do you want it to, or where is that community most active, I guess, and then going to that place and forming your establishing yourself in that area, because you could waste a bunch of time on Twitter talking to podcasters when your real audience for your, true crime podcast is on Facebook. And, they might want to join a group and talk about this. They might already be in a number of groups where you could be interacting with them and sharing your stuff that way. And you might get podcaster likes on Twitter, but if you want, if you're a true crime podcaster, you want true crime likes, not podcaster likes.
Yeah, it cracks me up because some of the people you can they'll have like 80 retweets, right? And you can go on to like their Podbean and see their downloads.
Yeah.
Maybe half of that after a week. So
right.
Yeah, you just got to do the right things. And there's nothing wrong with supporting each other at all. No. But it comes down to it again, like when people are like, I don't have enough time.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have enough time. We're all guilty of it. What are you going to do with your time that's going to make it right?
And then why are you doing it? If you don't have time to do it, then, I mean, you have to just expect that you're just out there hoping that somebody finds you and that the word of mouth takes you where you need to go. And you don't really control that at that point.
That's a very difficult thing when you hear people. I'll try not to go on a rabbit hole here.
Yeah.
Word of mouth is the most powerful thing.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, but it needs backing, right? You need to get out in front of people so they can do that word of mouth. Mm-hmm. So that always cracks me up. It's just not going just off word of mouth is going to be very rare to go viral or something, for example. Yeah. But you got to be strategic with what you're doing for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Word of mouth works if you're a celebrity already, or, you've,
and they still spend a boatload of money on advertising.
Yeah. And, again, got to find your audience, go to your audience, but then, going back to this point, it's spending your time in one area where you know that your audience is. So if you have a podcast and your niche is, focused in one certain area because you live in that world, you likely know where those people are hanging out, right? If you're doing a podcast about, I have a client that does a podcast about battery backup generators, and they've got a really good listenership because they go after only people who are living in the battery backup world.
Yeah.
And they've got something they can listen to that they really relate to, and they know where to find them, and they, go to trade shows, and they participate in forums and those kind of things, but they're not out on Twitter posting this podcast, because nobody on Twitter would care about that at all. So
and
spend your
there's
time.
Also, sorry, Fuzz, go ahead. No, go ahead.
I was going to say, spend your time interacting where your listeners are.
And I've been in a situation where I had a buddy that did a podcast about the garbage disposal industry. Mm-hmm. And when you're doing that, we use the word community all the time. It's a buzzword. Mm-hmm. They don't really want you to engage with them. They just want informative content. So sometimes it might be realizing that, right? Like, not all audiences are worried about you going out maybe if it's a business standpoint, they're not worried about literally you going out, developing a community, engaging with them.
Mm-hmm.
So the focus there would be you just need to have really good content because you're not going to get that engagement, with them if you put the work in because that's not why they're there. So it's also understanding like why you're doing it and
Mm-hmm.
why you're creating the content you are and what it's for and how it fits into people's lives. Like what are they getting out of it? And that'll also dictate the things that you should be doing and prioritizing.
Right. And then that goes down to talking about advertising and advertising to who you should be, who you want to reach. If you're doing any advertising, make sure you're focusing that on your specific audience. Don't stay too broad. If
Mhm.
you have a sports podcast, make sure you're advertising to people who actually care about the kind of sports that you're talking about in the geographical regions that you're talking about. Don't be wasting your money on, getting a broad range because of the, per click might be, or, per view might be
Yeah.
lower. You got to really focus and prioritize that audience. Otherwise, again, you're wasting your money and wasting your time. If you're wasting your money, you're also wasting your time because you put time
Yep.
into doing that. So, um, and another thing, so here's something breaking news, Jeff. When I first started doing Good Morning Podcasters, I also created the Good Morning Inbox newsletter. Well, that was, going to be an exclusive piece of content that I put out every single Monday to subscribers to the newsletter that wouldn't be on the podcast, which sounds great in
Yeah.
theory. But doing that work at right now, it's not, I have 15, 18 subscribers on that right
Yeah.
now after, a month and a half. And I could put the focus in and I'm sure I could grow that if I focused on it and I did that. But that means on Sundays, I'm writing an article and scheduling an email to go out and those kind of things. And I totally get the need for newsletters and the viability of newsletters, but for what I'm doing, does it make sense right now? And I don't think it is. It does. So probably going to put that on hiatus for a while. So,
Yeah. And like I before I even started Indiana Stories, I had like 160 subscribers to a newsletter because I
mhm,
pushed it. And I still have to prioritize that. I'm a few episodes behind on like what I'd like to be as far as sharing the content that I covered that week. But I'm being realistic, right? And that's not my priority necessarily. I mean, I need to figure out how to get a better workflow to get it done. But in the meantime, I got to focus on making good content, making the content. So it's interesting you bring that up. And I do want to, I know we're getting close to closing this out, but another thing that is significant here that we didn't touch up on, and I think you'll agree with this, Fuzz, we often go into this mindset where we got to do the Patreon route. We got to do
oh
this
yeah.
extra content route. And I find for me, and knowing the statistics of it, that that isn't necessarily a good use of everybody's time. You really have to think about it because most of the content on Patreon, a higher percentage than not, is actually not getting consumed.
Hmm.
So patrons are paying you, you're giving them extra content. More often than not, that is not they're not even listening to it. They're not even watching it for whatever reason.
Yeah.
So for me, it's always been even like I have the Twitter, what is it follow? Is it called subscribers now?
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh, I don't offer anything for that, and I put it in there. And I
Yep.
had somebody the other day that subscribes to me, and they're like, "You can't just not offer anything." I'm like, "Can I offer you something that I can't do? Like I don't have time to do?" So with
Yeah.
with Patreon and stuff like that, I've always had better luck going off the fact that it's just an appreciation thing. Not that I can
Yeah.
create more content because that would jeopardize the content that I'm already getting to you. It would take time away from it. It would take more time, which would then obviously make the content not as well.
Hmm.
So yeah, man, I think that's a big thing too. People get caught up on that. How am I going to make money? How am I going to make money? Well, making extra content's not always the way to go about it, right? I mean, let's be
Agreed.
honest.
Yeah, 100%. And if you can't sustain it, then what good is it? And then, back to your point, buy me a coffee or even some of the other donation, but like even your subscribership, just saying by subscribing, you're helping make a donation to my show so I can keep my show and content going. There's nothing extra for it, but it only costs $3.99 a month. So is that worth it to you? And your true subscribers will get it. And for some, Patreon works great. They offer great stuff. People get something out of it, but that percentage, I'm sure, is low. And for those of you who are, grinding at it and people aren't consuming that, are you making any money off of that? And are you like, are you even getting minimum wage out of it? And that's so I know we got to wrap up, but
no, that's a great point, man. And I think on the reverse side of that, it's also about knowing what your audience wants, who they are.
Yeah.
And I've also seen where they don't really want an extra episode. Maybe, and I've had this happen where it's a really big, engaged, maybe not even big, a really engaged Facebook group or something. They just want you to spend time with them. Some podcasts do.
Mhm.
Some audience listeners do. And that makes a huge difference rather than creating content. And it's sure it takes up time, but it's easier. Let's be honest. And just talking is easier.
Mhm.
So yeah, I mean that's something to keep in mind too. Like doing the right thing if you're going to go down that route.
I'm a big believer too in just being truthful with your audience and saying, like, I can't do all these extra things because if you want the show to still be good, like, can't focus on that, but I need to be financially sustained in order for me to keep doing this. So if you want to keep doing the show, please help me out. And every so often providing a spiff here and there, of course, interacting with them, as you said, those kind of things, great. But, a separate episode every week, running a Slack channel or a Discord, like, that's tough. You're like, your answer, you got to be on all day. So, and if you can do it, great. Otherwise, podcasting's going to suck.
Yeah, which will lead us to the end here. So people listening to this are probably podcasters, Fuzz. So my call to action really is let us know you're listening to it. Tell other podcasters that you're listening to it, that you find this interesting. You're getting help out of this. And I'll put Good Morning Podcasters with that. It's a brand. I mean, it's the same thing relatively.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, yeah, let us know. Share that with other podcasters. That's really what's going to help. Because Fuzz, you're doing a hell of a job with Good Morning Podcasters.
Thank you.
I love it. And I think it has a lot of value. But in order to do that, it's going to have to be like indie podcaster, right? Like people are going to need to let other people know that they're listening to it. If you have other podcaster friends, let them know.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the call to action that would, I think, help us at most. Well, we want to get the right people listening, telling us what they want to hear, what they want to learn more about. And we'll really go from there. And that's how we're going to grow and make better content.
I think we're the exception with podcasts about podcasting, with tweeting and posting on Good Pods. This is the exception to that rule. So don't do it for your show if it's not about podcasting.
Yeah, you got to know who you're yeah, exactly. Yep. Yeah, good to mention that.
But until next time, remember, podcasting sucks. It doesn't have to.
Yep.
Join us Saturday mornings right here on the Good Morning Podcasters feed for Podcasting Sucks. And Jeff, even though it does suck from time to time, I love doing it with you. So thanks for coming on.
Same here, man. I absolutely love your sweater, and I can't wait to show the world how amazing it is. So
It'll
podcasting
be great.
sucks a little bit less with you too, buddy. I appreciate it.
Thanks. We'll talk to you soon.